I'm Dan.
And I'm Gray. And this is the Shawk23 podcast.
Hi, I'm Shawk23, and this is the Shawk23 podcast. This is the podcast for creatives, by creatives, where I chat with everybody in the creative industry, where we share our knowledge and our experience. Today, my guests are none other than two very creative and entrepreneurial people who have been creating this comic book. I don't know if you've heard of LoverBoii series, and they're the people behind this comic book. That's KMD Comics, am I correct? And yeah, I'd like to make welcome Dan and Graham. Welcome to the show.
Hi, man.
Hi.
How are you guys?
Pretty good.
Yeah, no, we're doing all right.
I know, this is awkward. Like, because we have like normal conversations. It's always like that little bit that, just to get over like the introductions. After that, it's going to be smooth sailings. But I'm very excited to have you guys on board and just on the show to talk about this comic. It's kind of like breaking new ground in the country. Do you guys reckon as well?
It's something that we did a bit of research on in the very beginning, and it turns out that we are the first long-form serialized comic.
Yes.
So
that's exciting. Yeah. I'm excited, especially to have you, Dan, because like, for those of you who don't know, in 2020, every single month, I started an artist feature where I featured an artist, a digital artist on my Instagram platform. I interviewed them, I talked to them. And this is going to be the second episode of the podcast. And coincidentally, more like strategically, I asked Dan to be on the second episode of the podcast. So in a way, it's going to be like a before and after of what you've been doing and what you're up to right now.
Oh yeah,
how do you feel about that?
Oh, it feels weird to be back. Not back, but like be, I guess, interviewed by you now in like a different format. And
yeah, because you're usually, for those of you again who don't know, Dan is the host of the New Net podcast. So for him to be the subject of the interview is wild, but it's exciting. I'm happy for you.
I know it feels weird to be behind the mic and not having to worry about anything.
Yeah, you get to just chill and let me stress and pressure and do everything. But before we continue, here's a message from our sponsors. The Shawk23 podcast is proudly sponsored by Smarthills Corporate Solutions. Smarthills Corporate Solutions provide IT solutions for corporate businesses and creatives like myself. They provide a wide range of products and services and are certified resellers of software such as Microsoft Office, Adobe Creative Cloud, Wondershare, and more. To find out more, please visit their website on www.smarthills.com.pg. Now back to the show. Anyway, and we're back. So tell me more about you guys. Like, how did all of this comic book, how did it come to be? And how, I mean, just basically tell the story of how you guys got this started.
Ooh, this started with me venturing into digital art when I started taking that a bit seriously, and when I started to post that up. I think, I want to say 2019 is when I started posting up digital art. And then they reached the point where I felt like I was ready to make comics. And I think that was always the goal, because I always wanted to do something like that and make comics and predominantly be the artist of a comic book. And then so I started doing that in, like, first venturing into that, I want to say 2020, with my own little mini web comics that I'd put on my Instagram page at the time. And it was like stuff, it was like fan art stuff, like stuff based on video games, like the Fallout series.
Halo?
Halo, not so much, but the art, there was a bunch of Halo art and video game based art, but like, but in terms of things that I wanted to do as a comic book, I think the first one was this Fallout New Vegas thing that I was working on, and I think I was just stretching my legs and just getting a feel for things in terms of like action and visual storytelling, and in terms of like sequential visual storytelling, where you're doing an image and the next image has to relate to it and be part of one big story or sequence. And I think
storyboarding in essential.
Yeah. And I think that all started way back when I was, I think, in grade 9, back when Vision City still had a bookstore. They sold 2 books about how to make graphic novels, and I remember getting them. So I've had those books with me for the longest time, and I read them repeatedly, but I never had the means to use them and use the information that was in those books. And then now, and it was when I was making those Fallout fan comics, and when I was starting to employ some of the methods and teachings that was in those books. And yeah, so I had just stretched my legs with the Fallout comic. Had a lot of fun with the action. Had a rough idea of what I wanted to do with the story, but nothing really intense or major. And then I think in terms of, I knew that I needed to learn a bit more, so then I decided to do something that was a bit more dialogue heavy. And that's where I think I first did up what is now called, I guess, Chapter 0.
Okay.
And that is everything in the first book currently that is in color. And that was my first venture into doing a comic that was, I guess, more than 10 pages. So, so 10 slides in Instagram.
Oh, yeah. Because that's the max right now.
And I think that was the whole point of the first chapter, well, Chapter 0, just to see.
It's still on your Instagram?
Yeah. It's still there. The original, in its original format. And that was my first venture into that. And I just wanted to stretch my legs. And then I left it alone for a while. And then I started working on something else, or put something else in the works. And then something happened and I just couldn't, like, there's something that happens with artists and writers and comic book artists as well, where there's always something, the big plan or big dream project that they have, like they'll spend hours like building the world and doing everything. And then this thing always happens when they barely like scratch the surface with it, but it's always the thing that's the easiest and most natural thing to them that they're like, then they just suddenly start, like the ideas just start flowing. And I guess that's where LoverBoii became a thing. It originally didn't have the name LoverBoii. It was just a story. Okay. And then, and then I realized that there was so much more to everything that was happening in the story. And the story just had so much potential. I was like, okay, I might just try to build upon it and do something further with these characters and with the setup and with the story, and that's how it's now become a thing on its own. And
the thing is, it wasn't even like, it wasn't the first story. It wasn't the first story, but it did become our first choice. Okay, because there was another idea that we had that we wanted to do. That was this big thing, huge world. Yeah, so it was a big thing, huge world, and we had built out like a lot of the backstory, and I'd written down a bunch of stuff, and Dan had all of these plans, and we were thinking of doing that, but as we thought about it, we were like, it might be a little too heavy to go in with this. And it just felt more natural to go down that route of starting with a very small story, and then advancing and then growing it big. And then, as like Dan, has like comic book art been like your thing? Has that been the thing that you grew up with? Where does your art style heavily come from?
Oh yeah, I can confidently and proudly say that I started reading out comics. I was the kid that, like, I was always surrounded by kids who read books and novels. And I just did not like reading. And then I got into comics because I could visually see what the story was telling me. And I guess that's why I fell in love with comics from the beginning. And I like my style. I think you may have noticed, like, I think you've read issue 1 to 3, and I think you may have noticed a very drastic improvement in the art style and the art quality. And I think that's one thing I'm very proud of. And
I also follow your posts and your little updates. Yeah. And then like you talk about how you want to redraw everything because your art style keeps improving.
Yeah, and I think at that point I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I think
Graham's just shaking his head. He's like, "No, don't do it, bro."
I won't do it for the next volume, but I feel like for this first book, and because it's PNG's first comic, it has to be good. I won't be happy with myself if this is the first and it looks bad.
Yeah. No, like, I understand it. I just, the amount of changes, like when we put out issue 1 first, and then we did issue 2 and issue 3, and issue 2 was better than the first one. And he was like, oh, the art style has evolved, so I'm going to have to go back and redo issue 1. And at first I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. You're just going to redo issue 1 and 2, and then we'll be done with it. You can do 3, 4, 5. And then he's like, oh, no, it might change some more. So we'll like decide on the actual art style that we'll go with when we're done with volume 2, as in each issue is out. And then we'll go back and redo everything. I was like, man, you really want to make my life difficult? Because we're going to have to.
So you're the voice of reason. Like, you just have to tame him.
Yeah, I try. It doesn't work because, he's I mean, we're both creative, but he's the guy, he's the artist, and he'll want to go and do all of these crazy things, and he's always going to want to improve. So you just got to roll with the punches.
Yeah,
that's true.
And at this point, issue 4 looks better than issue 3, and now I'm like,
which is coming out soon, yes.
Yes.
But then I can relate to that perfectionist side of you, because I'm like that as well. And recently, I used to think it was a bad thing. Like, you kind of have like, what's the word? Like, audit yourself, have a good look in yourself, and then you're just like, oh, I'm a perfectionist. Everything has to be a certain way and go in a certain direction. For me personally, like, I've learned to accept that as a part of who I am, which is a good thing. Yeah. But then if I'm not careful, it can lead to my downfall, because procrastination is like a thing, because I want things to be so perfect. I can procrastinate and put things off. Or sometimes I just won't finish a project because I just feel like it's just not there yet. Yeah. How do you deal with that? Like, how are you taming that side of you?
He doesn't deal with it very well. Ooh. If I don't like jump on him, it doesn't like, oi, we said we were going to put it out at this time. I need you to get it done. And essentially that's what I was brought on for anyway. Just to remind him of these things and just kick him and be like, oi, Butts, this is happening. We need this now.
Yeah. On that, like, how did this relationship and this partnership form? Where did you guys meet, and how did you come together to put this book and go in this direction?
We met in 2017. So we've known each other for quite a while. And like, you know, we're both creative people, and we've both like been doing our own thing. But I think, we started taking this seriously, or at least him wanting to help me take my art a bit more seriously was when, I think it started when you took over the FB page. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you asked him to come on board?
I think, honestly, I think you offered, like,
I offered.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I was already doing a little bit of social media stuff, and I wanted to like shift into that a bit more. So I was like, let me run your Facebook and your socials, and I'll use that as practice, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then, besides getting a Facebook, I helped start the TikTok, and then we started putting content together.
TikTok is another beast as well. I just got into TikTok, and I'm still working on my strategy on how to put out content as well. So that's it. That's you guys just like, come on board, help me run my socials, and then
like we met, and we were very good friends for a number of years, and I knew that he was doing this. And one thing that I noticed was that thing where he just like puts stuff off sometimes, or just like he wants to do it.
Just the lack of consistency and just trying to guess. I mean, everybody needs a push, and I think that's a good thing that you have someone in your corner to really push you and to keep you, I think, centered and grounded so that you keep putting out work. I think sometimes we're just like our own worst critic, and sometimes we just don't appreciate like our work. We think it's never good enough, and it's good to have someone like a fresh perspective.
I honestly think it's overcorrected now. Now it's like I'm the most obsessed about this comic,
which is
like
good.
It's reached that point where like I don't even need motivation. Like I'm already doing things before he even asks about it.
And what was the push that got you? Because like this is not your full-time gig, am I correct? Like you guys, this is like a side gig. What do you guys do as a day job?
Well, for my day job, I think some of you may recognize me as the host of the NewNet podcast. So that's I describe that as my day job. So that's mainly my responsibility to do. And as you may realize, like Chan's been on the NewNet podcast as well before. And that's basically what I do. And I'm just very fortunate that the hours that I work for NewNet are very flexible and that they accommodate for me pursuing these kinds of projects as well. So, and I think when we started taking the comic seriously, it was a very interesting time because, you know, producing a book takes a lot of capital to move. And then at the time when we first started doing this, I think I was the only one working. So that was one of the main challenges, and also just like, you know, doing my normal day job and then also trying to make this thing happen. But
yeah, Graham?
For myself, I'm an event coordinator with Blue 7 team. So
sounds exciting.
Yeah, no, it's pretty great, and I just thought it would be a useful field to work in, especially for what we plan to do with like the book stuff later. Having that knowledge of how to run events is going to be essential for me, I think.
There you go.
But
it just sounds like this is just training ground, because I've read the book, and after I read the book, I was very excited about what's next. Not in terms of this chapter, but like the projects that are going to come out. Because this is, to me, like how I saw it is this is training ground, that you're kind of like testing it out, experimenting, trying out different styles and how to write. And then from this, like the lessons that you're going to learn from this project, what you're going to do next is just going to be so much better. And I'm very excited about that. And the book reads so well. It was like, I'm pleasantly surprised, because I'm a big fan of Dan. I've always been a big fan of Dan and just the art style. And then that's why I bought the book. And then I thought it was just a very simple, this boy just wants to get this girl's attention. But then when I read it, then it was just designed so well. Like the panels are well put together. And then the writing is just another part of it that really grabbed me. And then it was the part where I realized that this isn't a story about a boy chasing a girl. This is a story about a boy trying to better himself and trying to be, and that's like right up my alley. Like I'm a big fan and I value like self-improvement, personal development. Those are like I will just consume that kind of content. And it was at that moment that I just switched and I became a fan of this book. It's like, okay, I'm in for the ride. And then how you were telling the story. And if you haven't bought the book, you should, because it's just designed and it's just put together so well. Like it's not straightforward, like in a sense, like this happens. Like there's flashbacks and there's like there's, I don't want to give too much away, but like there's future him or present him. And then you kind of take a glimpse back into his past and you try to figure out what makes him him in today. And then like it's so good. I mean, I'm geeking out about it, just being excited. And then for you to then, like, this is your first project. I'm very excited about what's coming next. And I think that's what I want to talk about. Like, where does this whole influence for this comic book? Because everybody talks about comic books and everybody thinks superhero. But this is not a superhero story. This is about a group of kids in school. And it's very relatable. It's very nostalgic. I read it and I thought about my primary high school days. This is the kind of nonsense that we occupied our time with. And I like that I haven't seen like, I don't know what time of the setting, at the time of setting the story takes place, but I was guessing that it takes place like pre-social media, because nobody's on their phones. So like that was the time people passed around notes and people were whispering and things like that. Like, I don't know. It just really brought me back to my childhood and growing up. And I think for millennials, for people who grew up in that era, you will absolutely love this book as well. So how did why not a superhero book?
Honestly, it goes back to that old writing advice of writing what you know. And I think, I think when people choose a superhero, or whenever they say, oh, you should do a PNG superhero, there's a lot more than just, making the superhero pop in again. And there's a lot more writing and thought and understanding that has to go into producing something like that. And so
just world building as well.
And so, I decided to do something about someone in high school because I remember what it was like being in high school. So it was the easiest thing to do. But just because it's the easiest thing to do, it came with its own challenges of like understanding the story. Like I'm very happy that you enjoyed reading it. Like that's the biggest thing for me, because like I said, when I started doing this, I wanted to be just an artist, and I didn't even think I'd ever write anything. I didn't think I'd ever.
That was like I was trying to segue into the like how did you take on the writing, and how much of a challenge was it?
Man, I think I can tell you now that the original version of the story and how it was going to go was a lot darker and it was just, it was a lot more, I'd say hopeless. Like it was coming from a more darker place. And then I think I realized that I can do something more with this. I can do something more creative and constructive with this. So then I think that's how it is what it is now. And I think I can say with like 100% certainty and like as confidence that everything in color in the first book 100% actually happened.
Oh, okay.
But then everything afterwards, everything after that initial chapter is all fiction, and it's all, stuff that I've created for the world. And I'm just using the characters and the setting to tell a story and tell a message. But yeah, it's been it's been an interesting journey, especially the writing side. Yeah. And I'll be honest, like I've been drawing for most of my life, but it's weird that I say this now, that I honestly think I enjoy the writing a bit more. I enjoy the drawing, but I think the process and the whole, just the method of writing that I do, I think I'm enjoying that a lot more than the drawing.
Yeah.
Like when he started, like he said, he was the only one working at the time. And when we were trying to push this project, we went into this whole, okay, we got to keep each other in check. So you have to be doing what you're supposed to be doing. I have to be doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I was just, he was pushing me to make content, and I was pushing him to also write everything down. And he'd be sitting at his market that he was selling drinks at the time, and he'd be writing stuff down in the notebook. And the notebook is still there, right? It's got everything from like the first, I think, volume 1, issue 2, and issue 3. Yeah.
Wow.
So from that to like what we bring to people, it's kind of crazy to think about, because these are discussions that we have. Like we just sit down and talk about his experiences or my experiences, stuff that we went through in high school, right? And we'll be sitting down in the middle of the night. I'll get a call, and it'll just be him like running through an idea. I was like, bro, I'm trying to sleep. Why do you keep disturbing me? But it's necessary, because then it gets me up and out of bed, and then I sit at my computer, and then we start talking and we start writing stuff down. So yeah, it's just been a really crazy process. Like from how we started to where we are now. It's fun to watch him grow. Like that's been. But
then you're growing as well, so it's more like I mean, it's a partnership thing, and I'm seeing it how it goes. Before we go in and talk to the business side and the partnership, I really want to know what the inspiration for this comic is. Because like when I read it, I remember the shows that came on Kids Corner, like those little kids shows, and just like the crazy things that they came on, like Snobs, and then there was like the Sleepover Club, and like all the little, those shows that were targeted toward preteens, and just like the silliness of it all. And then there's also like some influence, like some scenes that remind me of like anime and stuff like that. I'm not like a big anime fan. I enjoy the artwork, but it reminded me of Avatar: The Last Airbender, like the goofy episodes where Aang is just goofy or tough. And like, is that the influence behind this? Is that part of the influence that brought this comic book?
Oh yeah. It's like,
and probably like the tone of writing as well. It's like, it's just very reminiscent of those kind of things.
Oh no, most definitely. It's like how you mentioned how like it resembles something that would come on Kids Corner like back in the day. I'm actually glad. I'm very happy that you got that vibe, because I do believe that like PNG kids don't have something like that represents them or that they can relate to. And even now, content like that doesn't really exist anymore nowadays. Like something like Sleepover Club doesn't.
I don't even know if Kids Corner is still on the air or not.
Like there's no modern equivalent of something like Sleepover Club.
Yeah.
And then I think now
Snobs or like
like fun kid stuff.
Yeah.
And I think like the comic does deal with like mature themes or like stuff that like is serious, but I feel like there's a missing side of just fun stuff. Like more than anything, I made the comic as entertainment.
Yep.
I'm not trying to push an agenda. I'm not trying to do awareness on something. I'll cover issues, but like the main reason I made this was for entertainment, and I feel like that's very much severely lacking. Like there's nothing that like PNG kids can relate to, and I'm not saying that this is the answer, but I guess this is my attempt at covering that. And I think as far as inspiration goes, I think one of the big things that I have noticed, and it's one thing that's recurring whenever I speak to someone who's bought the book and who's read the book, as far as the story has come now, is that they always end up relating to it so much. And it's always specifically the male readers and the male audience members. And I think one of the main reasons why I really wanted to do this book is because there's a lot of media out there that depicts girls in high school and their experiences in high schools, but in high school. But there's nothing that represents young males. And I'm not talking about senior, like, grade 12, grade 11.
Yeah.
I'm talking about when that transition period of when you're a child, and then like grade 9, grade 10, and then when you're trying to decide what type of like pre-young adult. So there's nothing specifically about boys and that specific experience. Like there's one of my friends who, like, I was brainstorming with them earlier. She's a girl, and she's one of the main influences that made me want to take the more relationship side of things with the story. I think some of the story elements and events in the story happen where the main character does something that only a dude would do.
Yep.
And then she was asking me like, oh, why would he think this way? Why would he like jump to that conclusion? I'm like, because it's a guy. Because it's a male perspective, and he's processing this information. He's coming up with this idea like, oh, maybe like for example, oh, this girl spoke to me. Maybe it means something. Yeah. Like that's not the logical assumption, but that is something that a kid dealing with hormones would connect the dots and think that this is the case. So, and I think that's been the main thing that a lot of people that have read the book have come back to me and said that, it took me back to how I thought of and how I viewed the world at that time. And I think,
those are my favorite panels of the comic when the main character, Dib, it's all that internal dialogue and that internal conflict that he has, and then how you represent it on the page. Those are my favorite panels because I think we've all been there where we've had an inner dialogue and we keep questioning ourselves and for it to be portrayed on a page that is so related, because I thought it was like, like if I were to imagine myself, this is how I would, and you do it so well. Like, I think that's part of the charm and the relatability of this comic. And then like you saying something like that, I also see it as in the future, it can be as a resource, kind of like reading material for like young, very, very young, teenagers who are transitioning into like adult and like navigating that. Like it's a really good resource for them to be like, hey, like these are the kind of weird interactions. It's a really good representation of that time. Like it really took me back. And again, like that's a pleasant surprise. I was just expecting a very straightforward story. And then I'm taking on this journey, and then not only, being impressed by the artwork, but that's just like how the story is unwinding. And it just, I don't know. You'll have to read it for yourself, because if I talk too much, I'm going to give everything away. But it's very well put together and everything.
You were just saying that it's if you keep talking, you might give some stuff away, and that's a struggle that we face. Like I would like to tell you, Mike's camera off. Some stuff, right? But I can't do it because it's
getting to MCU level stuff now. This is
like because there is quite a bit that we would like to do. I mean, people have been asking us, do you have any superhero stories? And while that is what you think about when you think comics, and while I cannot confirm or deny these allegations, it's definitely something that we have thought about, but this is our like main focus right now. And LoverBoii, it's not going to end for at least another 3 years.
Oh wow!
LoverBoii as a story isn't going to end for at least another 3 years, or 4 even. And even then, that's not the end of that universe.
Ooh.
There's 2 other stories, possibly 4 other stories, which will involve some very familiar faces, or at least they will be very, very soon.
Right.
That's all I can say. I approve this message.
You had it. You heard it here first. I don't know. I'm very excited for you. So it's generated. You guys are starting to get a good following. Yes. Like, how has been reception towards the comic?
Well, like we've been saying, like, when people hear comic books, they think superheroes. So it was kind of a difficult sell to really like try to convince people, hey, buy this book or follow the story. It was a bit of a hard sell, but I think with how we use social media, we managed to at least get a good amount of interest, and just to tell people this is what the story is about. Give it a chance, buy a copy. But yeah, overall, I'd say been fairly positive. Like we haven't yet reached like, you know, really like negative backlash on anything. But I'd like to say overall, a lot of people have bought a lot of books, and I just want to say that I appreciate and love everyone who's bought at least a copy of one of the books. Like you know, it's like I'm happy. Like whenever we sell the books, I'm always glad that if we sell at least one whenever we set up a market stall. And I think, yeah, the reception has been overall positive, a lot of interest. Like, there are people that are saying, oh, when are you going to do, you know, superhero comics? But, like, it's a very different type of book. And I think, given the subject matter and how it's been received, like, I'm just happy that people like it. And I'm happy that it's been doing as well as it has been.
Yeah. When you released the first book, you kind of blew up on social media. Like everybody, you got interviews, even Cabbage Gang featured, you know, one of his kids, he had their comic book. How did you take all of that? From going to just like being silent, just drawing, countless hours putting into releasing a first book, then having it and then selling it, and then everybody starting to post and repost. Because you also did like a radio interview as well with Mo from Tribe. And then there were so many others. How did you guys handle that? Were you even expecting it to blow up like that?
Honestly, these are things that just fell into our lap. We just happened to be at the right place at the right time. And even just the making of the book, we didn't plan this at all. We had a completely different thing that we were going to do. We were going to go with merch first that was just for us and our family and try to get people's interest that way before we actually started making the book. And then I was sick. Right, so I had to go check out what was it, PIH? Yeah, at Waigani Central. So we went there, and I went in, saw the doctor, came back out, and as we're walking out, I turn and look, and I see the Color Studios sign, and it was on that day that we just decided, all right, let's go inside and get prices, like how much it would cost to print one book.
Just was as if you were meant to get sick.
Because
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because prior to that, we were trying to get something ready for this year's Arts Activism Month, which was March this year. Yep. So the deadline was we had to get something physical or just something to show people. And I think this was like a week out. Like almost exactly 7 days out. So that was the
intention. You guys were trying to do something just for art, to get out for art activism.
Yeah.
Yes. And then, yeah, we went in, we were already, I think the PDF was already available at the time, which was basically the first book in PDF form. So we already had, we showed them the PDF. We were like, what would it take to get this done physically? They told us, we gave them the file, we discussed prices, and then we reached a very reasonable amount that we've been able to like keep consistent.
Yep, which is what, $35?
Well, we're selling them for 35, but the pricing that they gave us to produce them was very fair, honestly, and it was the best possible price they could have given us, and things just went off from there.
And when we started, we didn't even have. It's crazy because we didn't have enough to print even 10 books.
Wow!
And we were lucky because one of our broskies, shout out Jacob Lovai, we love you. He helped us with some coins to get the rest of the books printed from that very first batch of issue 1.
How many issues did you print in the first batch?
15.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
So we only had enough money to print like 4 or 5.
Wow.
And he gave us the
That's
means
huge.
to print 10 more. And when we went and started doing the sales at Art Activism, they were gone.
Did Jacob read the book?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Jacob has bought like a copy of every single book.
So he read the book before he put money into it.
I mean, yes, the PDF was available.
Yeah, PDF was already available.
But yeah, he's just a super helpful bro, and he decided to help us out this one time when we needed to do the printing. And yeah, partly because of him, it all came together, and we managed to push that out in time for Art Activism.
Was that like the main, like the first issue and the reception of people have towards the first issue, did it like motivate you guys to keep on and to like push for? Was it always the plan to release more than one issue? Or was it because of the success of the first one that like, oof, let's see where this takes us and let's keep telling this story?
Oh no, the story like existed as a whole prior to the books being made and prior to people even seeing anything, like I already had like an end goal, like an end result already in mind, but honestly, I just used the good reception as motivation to just keep going. And like now that's partly why I want to be the best it can possibly be. Because now, like, it was one of those things where you're doing a thing and you don't know it works until people start liking it. You're like, oh wow, okay, people actually like this. Okay. Like you don't have, like, it was one thing to do the first book without any proof, without even knowing that people would like it. But then now that I know that there's a market for it, that there's an interest in telling these kinds of stories, I was like, okay, I can go full swing. Like, I already wanted to produce it, but now, like I said, it's just more motivation to keep it going and make it the best possible product it can be.
Okay, cool. So in the side of the business, how do you split your roles? What are your roles inside, like, running the business of producing this comic and selling it?
Oh, well, that's pretty easy. He's the artist and writer. He does all of the creative stuff, and I do everything else. That is by necessity. It's just to make sure that Dan has clear headspace, just so he can focus on all of the creative stuff. And
lucky you. Some of us are just multitasking. We're running our business and trying to be creative at the same time.
I have no idea how everyone else does it. Because when I'm focusing on
That's why this podcast exists, so that people can come in like, this is how I'm doing it.
Gosh, because when I'm focusing on the book, I am 100% obsessed with the book, with writing, the art, everything. I cannot even comprehend. Like, there's moments where, like, you know, there's like a side of me I can switch off. Like, when I'm in book mode, I can't even process anything else that's happening in the world. When it's off, then I can think about other things in my life. But when I'm in 100% production mode, I can't even think about food or what I'm doing on that day. Like, I am just creating.
This is the thing. We complain quite a bit about the constant blackouts that mess with our production schedule. But if it wasn't for some of those blackouts, he wouldn't have had food that day because he would have just forgotten.
So it's a blessing
to, like,
in disguise. So when you say you handle everything, what is it exactly that you handle? Just sales, marketing, and running the social media,
running the socials.
And making sure he's fed and well and look after.
Yeah, because he's not going to do it for himself.
Do you make sure that he gets to his job on time as well, or does he?
No, actually, he makes sure I get to my job on time now. We've done a bit of a shift now where I have him on as my driver.
Okay.
So it's kind of weird because in KMD, he's my boss, but then, it's a whole thing. But otherwise, it's
But you guys work pretty smoothly together, like no hiccups or anything.
The synergy, and then just like what we have this joke we always say we're literally the same brain. Like that we always reach the same conclusion on things and have the same idea about things. So oftentimes when we're coming up with an idea, it's like, like either I already thought of it or he already thought of it.
Yep.
That's great. So, like, what's next for you guys? Like, where do you see this comic going? You don't have to give me specific plans because you guys know, like, where do you guys, like, what's your vision for the future?
Well, for this story in this universe, there's like 20 years worth of content.
Wow.
I can confidently say that much.
But you guys are working on other stories as well. Like, you guys are being very secretive, but I'm trying to get out as much as I can out of you guys.
Yeah. There's a bunch of projects that we have thought about working on that we may put out soon. A couple of one-shots just to garner some interest and see how that goes over with our consumer base. But we've got quite a few years ahead of us and many years worth of content. The biggest thing for us now is, like, we're not even sure if we're going to be able to do it all by ourselves.
Okay.
And it's something that's another thing I have to worry about now is expansion.
Yeah, scaling up. And then how long does it take to produce one book?
I'm still figuring that out, but roughly 2 months. 2 months if the writing is already done. 2 months if everything's already planned out. And I think, well, because this is like the first, it's volume 2, but this is the first volume where I'm releasing them on a set schedule. So there's a lot of like, you know, like everything's under pressure, under time constraints. So like, because it's the first time I'm doing this, I'm still learning and trying to adjust and figure out a process. I think I'm reaching that point, but I can confidently say that by the time Volume 3 is in production, it should be a smoother ship. But right now, like, I'm still figuring out the art style and trying to be a better storyteller. So there's things that, like growing pains. It's basically growing pains and trying to make this as efficient as possible. So I'd like to say roughly 2 months, and that's 2 months if there's nothing else happening in those 2 months, if there's if I can consistently have power for those 2 months, and I can consistently work on the comic book, it's roughly about 2 months. And and then writing, I think writing is the most fun part, and I think after Volume 2 is done, I have planned a sort of a hiatus of about at least 4 months, just to both take the pressure off myself and both take my mind off the comic as well, but then also to spend time focusing on the writing aspect and pre-planning aspect. So then by the time we reach production, once production starts again next year, it should be a much smoother sailing ship than it's been this year.
So which comes first? Like, what's the process from start to finish for creating the comic? Do you start with writing and then you start sketching out ideas? Does the art come first or the story comes first?
I think it's a bit of a mixed bag. Sometimes the art comes first and sometimes the writing comes first. Like there's been instances where I come up with a character design and it's from just looking at the character. I'm like, oh my God, I can do so much more with this story. And then sometimes it's just predominantly the writing. Like I sit down and I just think about a character, and I think I keep saying, like, I am the one who's the most obsessed about this. And I think one thing that I've been obsessed about in terms of writing is just good dialogue. I always like it when characters are speaking to each other and information is conveyed through that way. And I think there have been instances, and like producing this comic book has been its own learning process. And I think now on average, every book has about 38 pages. And there were instances where I wrote to a certain amount, and then in trying to put the writing and characters in to fit them into 38 pages, there were instances where what I wrote wasn't enough to make up for 38 pages. And I was just thinking, and then I reached the point where I was thinking about this the other day, and I reached the point where there was a similar problem to what happened on, I think, the first season of Game of Thrones, where they didn't have enough content to fill up the entire first season. So what they did was they had characters who never interacted in the book have conversations with one another, because, you know, they were in the same city, they were in the same room at the time, so it's only natural for them to have had this interaction. There's an example of that happening in the third book, where Dib speaks to the Linda character. That entire interaction was not scripted. That was not typed up. It was literally written up in pencil on the back of the printed script, because I realized that there were like 4 or 5 pages where there was just blank pages. I didn't have anything planned for it. And I specifically with issue 3, I had focused on condensing and putting as much information and visual information into each page. And so once in doing that, I ended up creating these blank pages that I just didn't have anything planned for. So there was an entire interaction that I thought, like, it addresses information that I did want to be told later on, but a bit earlier. And it sets up for a specific event that happens at the end of issue 3 and gives that realization that that character has more weight and more gravity. So in a way, it's sort of just creatively solve the problem for myself without even realizing.
That sounds like fun, because I feel like you're discovering the characters as you're writing them, and that sounds like a fun thing to be a part of. Like, you're in the early stages of the business, and with that comes like a lot of ups and also a lot of downs. What's your mindset and your attitude to dealing with the obstacles of starting a business this early in the process?
And I think one of the biggest things we'd face, just because the comic book as a thing, it's not an industry that exists in this country. It is a thing overseas, you know, comic books, graphic novels, publishing, all of that. We have a publishing industry for books. But as far as an industry for a medium like this, like comic books, it didn't exist. It doesn't exist until trailblazing. It's like we created this industry. Like it didn't exist, and I think that was one of the main challenges in trying to figure out what we had to do in terms of like, the legal side of things,
Yep.
because it's not a normal book. Well, what do we have to do to like protect this and protect the characters and protect the story? I think that was one of the main challenges.
That's
trying to
like
figure it out.
my biggest.
Mm.
That was my biggest headache in the very beginning, was thinking about how am I supposed to make sure that he's protected and that the comic is, not gonna get us in any trouble, or nobody's going to try to take his artwork from him. And it was a whole thing because there was nothing that I could look at as an example.
Oh,
And
yeah,
it's like a crazy thing to think about that. Oh my God, people that are coming later are going to look at us as the example.
Yeah, exactly.
Man,
That's the exciting part of pioneering. Like, it's scary and it's weird and it's like, it stresses you out. But then I think the deeper purpose that comes from that is that people who are going to come after you are going to use you as the example and say, okay, because he did, because they did, we can. And I think that's one of the things that really got to excite me about creating this podcast and being in this industry, is that I'm meeting so many pioneers who are just doing amazing stuff, and then to try to document some of that and be like, hey, it's exciting to look further down. And we've always had these kind of conversations where 10, 20 years down the line, we're going to be like, all the other people are going to come back, or they're going to look up to us and say like, oh, because they did this, then we can. That's like, at the end of the day, it's kind of, for me, it's like, it's very fulfilling. And I find that that's like a sense of purpose within the community, to at least put a brick to laying the foundations for, or helping to build and launch this industry wherever it goes.
Yeah. It's a crazy thing to think about, because like in any other country, this has already happened, right? The industry exists. You're competing with 700, 800 other, or 8,000 other people that are making the same type of thing as you.
The laws exist to protect the medium like this. That's another thing we face as well. And I think and then I realized that, like you said, like that's just how it is. If you're the first to do it, this is the challenge. When you're the first to do it, it's going to be difficult. And I think whenever there's a challenge, or whenever something comes up in relation to making the comic or producing or just reprinting a batch, like whenever something goes wrong, I always think like it's basically God asking me, how much do you really want to make this comic? Like he's testing me like, oh, here's this challenge. Do you still want to do it? Here's this delay. Do you still want to make this comic? I'm like, okay, no. I always see it as a challenge of like, because you're the first doing it, you're going to be put through these trials to prove that it can be done. Yeah. Because the amount of, I don't want to say backlash, but the amount of
just setbacks and obstacles.
Setbacks and obstacles, as well as like, the environment. When you're surrounded by people or individuals that don't see what you're doing as a viable thing, it's like it's a challenge to you. Like, how much do you really want to do this? And whenever there's a challenge, like now, if there was a saying that Graham and I had, I think in the early months, where we'd hear a bunch of good news and be happy about it, and then things don't pan out, and then we always say to ourselves, "Oh, just continue like we have been." Yeah. Okay. No. Let's just keep going.
Situation, no change.
It's just like just the same course, stay the same course,
so
same
it's just
mission.
Discipline and just consistency have just gotten you through the not so glamorous days of running a creative business.
No, but that's the thing, is that the bad days are the good days. Like, suffering is necessary. This is something that I hold close to myself, that if things are not bad, you will not feel the need to go out and change. If everything went your way, you would get complacent and you'd be lazy. And then what? Because if things weren't like, if things were good for us, we wouldn't even have bothered.
True.
Like, I don't think we would have even bothered, right? But because we were struggling so much, we were just thinking, what can we do? We don't want to work for other people forever. We want to be able to do our own thing. We want to be able to go and make something of ourselves. And then, this guy's got his art, I have my art and writing, and it's the bad days are the good days. Suffering is necessary. It forces you to get up and go out and do something. Because if you don't do anything...
One of my favorite sayings is that if nothing changes, nothing will change. And like, I relate to that. So I'm very happy that you guys have the same mindset, because I feel like we're living the days of social media. Everything is just glamorized. It looks so good with the filters and everything. But behind the scenes, I think every creative struggles in one way. And then having mindset like that we, like, the hard times are necessary, the suffering, the low points, we're going to be broke. I've been broke so many times, and it's just like, yeah, it's okay. It's a learning process. I'm learning how to manage my money. And then, like, so many jobs have gone through, like, so many jobs that we're going to pay really good money, or like was going to really elevate and take it. And then all of that fell through. And it's just, like you said, it's just been training grounds. And for me personally, like, I used to think that was a bad thing. And then I started to listen to other successful people and entrepreneurs. And I always feel like they're laughing at me. It was like, it's part of the process, dude. You're going to go through so much before everything. And I remember there was a time when I was questioning myself whether to, like, I should get a real job. I miss I miss the stability. But then people like Steve Jobs almost went broke before Apple took over, Bill Gates, even like the richest man on earth right now, Elon Musk. Like, all those businesses were failing until NASA took over SpaceX, and then now he is what it is. And it's always to a breaking point, then things start to turn around. So I applaud you for still going and still doing it. And if not now, then when? I think, like, for me personally, like, I just don't want to die an old man regretting, looking back and be like, what if I did this? I want to live a full life. I think David Goggins says it well. It's like, I want to die empty. I want to realize the full person, like, realize myself fully before I go. And I really like how he talks about, like, he imagines himself dying and going to heaven, meeting God, and then God has all his stats up. And then God is like, this is who you is supposed to be. And his whole drive is to match that, to die with that image of who he thinks he is, to sync up. So I'm excited, and I'm very happy with where you guys are and where you guys are going to be. My excitement is 1 year from now when I have you back on the show. Like, where are we in the different aspects? So I think we're coming to a close. But I want you guys to let everybody know, where can they find your comic? How can they buy one? Where can they find you on your social media as well?
All right, you guys can find us on Facebook. That's KMD Comics, the Facebook page. On Instagram, that's Dan's personal. It's at Killmonger Dan_117 art. And on TikTok, it's also at KMD Comics. So yeah, if you want to place an order to purchase comics, we do deliveries every Thursday, and it's 35 kina a piece. So you can just shoot us a message and we'll set it up.
Yeah. And please, like, support local artists. People are pouring out their heart. But don't buy it because, like, I don't like this excuse, buy it because it's local and because it's Papua New Guinean. You should buy it because it's a quality product. Like, quality trumps. I'm a big advocate of, like, you produce quality work and then ask people for their money. Don't go asking for their money because you're, like, local and everything. You have to produce quality. Any final words to our audience or to your readers or to anyone who, just any word of encouragement?
Well, to my readers, I just want to say, everyone who's bought a book, thank you so much. I love every single one of you. Thank you so much for following the story. If I had it my way, if I had it my way, I'd release each volume as a solid book. And I just want to applaud everyone for just following along and keep following the story. And there's more coming. There's like Graham mentioned, there's so many years of content. We just need time and money to produce all of this. And to anyone who has seen the comic and has always been wanting to make their own comic, I just say, please, we need more people in this space. It's pretty cool being the only one here, but I'd like to see a lot more other people join the industry as well and start making their own stuff. And also just don't be afraid to produce something like this. Don't listen to people who say that you can't do it. Be stubborn about it. Be obsessed about it. Be crazy about it. Because if you're not going to be crazy about it, no one else will, and it won't become a thing. Like, the amount of times people have told me about, oh, I had this idea for a comic a couple of years back, but then, it didn't come into anything. And I'm saying, like, no, you should have done it. You should have just continued to do it. Be stubborn about it. And also, to go back to that point about motivation, don't rely on motivation. I can tell you 100% there were some pages in each of these comics where I just didn't feel like drawing. But I had to get it done. And then the funny thing was that they became some of my favorite pages. So Yeah, no, just if you have an idea for a comic, pursue it 100%. Make it a reality. It's possible. Look at what I did, and just chase after it and don't give up. Don't listen to anyone who says that you can't.
Anything from you, Graham, or he said it all?
Yeah, he's basically said everything. I mean, the only thing I can say to anyone that's trying to do the exact, like do what we're doing and put out a comic of your own, please do. Because when that Comic-Con happens, and it is going to happen, I don't want us to be the only table there. This is not a thing where I'm going to start going and recruiting people to come and work for KMD Comics. While that is something that we are planning, if you want to put out something of your own, if you want to be competition, please, we welcome it. We keep each other sharp. Yeah. That's how this works. That's how this business is going to work. You make sure that we are always kept on our toes, and we'll do the same for you. So come at us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan and Graham, for coming on the show and being part and supporting my venture into podcasting. I had a blast. It's just so good for just other creatives to just sit and talk and have, I don't know, just, share ideas. It's fun. It was great. Anyways, that wraps up another episode of the Shawk23 podcast. I would like to say thank you. A big thank you to the official sponsor of the Shawk23 podcast, Smarthills Corporate Solutions. For more information, please follow them on their website at www.smarthills.com.pg. I also like to say thank you to the crew who are with me today. Jerry from Aesthetics PNG, Judah from Vasily Photography, and Oswald, who just left us. But thank you so much for staying and supporting me, and MK for editing, and for everyone here, and for all the future episodes that are coming. I hope that will continue to bring you value. I'm rambling. Anyways, I want to say thank you for listening this far, for paying attention. If you have listened or watched this far, thank you so much. I hope to bring you. Please like and subscribe and follow us on all our socials. To all my fellow creatives, please dream big, embrace your weird, and remember, all things are possible today that believe. I'm Shawk23. Aparua.